The stars had always been kind to humanity. For 300 years they had spread across the darkness, building homes on distant worlds, raising families under alien suns. 17 colonies thrived in the cold void of space. Children were born who had never seen Earth's blue skies, yet they still called themselves human. They still dreamed of the old world their ancestors had left behind. Commander Ben Hartley stood on the bridge of the starship Relentless and watched the stars pass by through the wide observation window. He was a tall man, with gray at his temples and tired lines around his eyes. 20 years in space had taught him many things. It had taught him patience, it had taught him caution. But nothing had prepared him for the message that came through his communication system that cold morning. The distress signal was weak and broken. It came from Novara 6, a mining colony on the outer rim of human space. The voice belonged to a young woman, and she was screaming. Behind her screams, Hartley could hear explosions and the strange humming sound of weapons he did not recognize. "They came from nowhere," the woman cried. "Ships, thousands of ships. They are burning everything. Please, someone help us. Please." The signal died. Hartley felt his blood turn to ice. He turned to his crew and ordered them to set a course for Novara 6 at maximum speed. But deep in his heart, he already knew they would be too late. They arrived to find nothing but ashes. The colony was gone. The buildings, the ships, the people, all of it had been reduced to blackened rubble. Hartley walked through the ruins, with his boots crunching on broken glass and twisted metal. He found toys melted into the ground. He found photographs burned at the edges, showing smiling faces that would never smile again. He found the body of a child clutching a stuffed animal, and he had to look away because the sight was too much to bear. The attackers had left a message carved into the largest piece of debris. It was written in a language humanity had learned to fear over the past decade, the language of the Velkorath Dominion. Contamination detected, purification complete. The Velkorath were not new to humanity. They had been watching from the shadows for years, a vast empire that controlled half the galaxy. They saw themselves as the supreme species, the rightful rulers of all creation. To them, every other race was either a servant or a pest to be exterminated. Humanity, with its rapid expansion and stubborn independence, had been classified as the latter. The attacks came fast after Novara 6. Within 72 hours, 6 more colonies burned. The Velkorath fleet moved like a wave of destruction, 10,000 warships, darkening the skies of peaceful worlds. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. Their shields laughed at human weapons. Their cannons cut through human ships like a hot knife through butter. Admiral Grace Monroe received the reports in her command center on Earth. She was an older woman, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too much death. She had fought in 3 wars during her long career, but she had never faced anything like this. The numbers were impossible, the enemy was unstoppable, and her people were dying by the millions. She called an emergency meeting with Earth's leaders. Presidents and generals and scientists gathered in a bunker deep beneath the mountains, their faces pale with fear. They argued and shouted and blamed each other, but Monroe sat in silence and listened. When they finally stopped talking, she stood up and spoke the truth no one wanted to hear. "We cannot win this war," she said. "Not with guns, not with ships. The Velkorath are too many and too strong. If we fight them directly, we will be destroyed within a month." The room erupted in protests, but Monroe raised her hand and continued, "But we will not surrender. We will not go quietly into the night. Humanity has faced extinction before. Ice ages, asteroids, plagues, our own weapons. Every time we survived. Every time we came back stronger. This will be no different." She explained her plan. It was called Operation Ember, and it had been prepared in secret for decades. If Earth ever fell, humanity would not die with it. Instead, they would scatter like seeds in the wind. They would hide in asteroids and moons and abandoned stations. They would embed themselves in alien societies as refugees and workers. They would wait and watch and learn. And when the time was right, they would strike back. Millions of people were loaded onto ships and sent to hidden locations across the galaxy. Children were separated from parents. Lovers said goodbye for the last time. Soldiers stayed behind to buy time for the fleeing civilians, knowing they would not survive. The Velkaroth reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. Hartley watched from the bridge of the Relentless as the enemy fleet filled the sky like a swarm of angry insects. Earth's defense grid activated, filling the void with missiles and laser fire. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might hold the line. Then the Velkaroth answered. Their weapons were beyond anything humanity had imagined. Beams of purple light cut through defense stations like they were made of paper. Missiles exploded harmlessly against shimmering shields. One by one, the orbital platforms fell silent. One by one, the defending ships were torn apart. Hartley ordered a retreat. There was nothing more they could do. As the Relentless pulled away from the dying planet, Admiral Monroe sent one final transmission. It was broadcast on every frequency, aimed at every corner of the galaxy. Every spacefaring species heard her voice. The Velkaroth heard it too. To the Velkaroth Dominion and all who watch, Monroe said, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos around her. You have attacked our home. You have killed our people. You believe you have won. But I want you to remember this day. Remember who started this war. Remember that you were warned. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold as the void itself. You have just signed your doom. This is not the end of humanity. This is only the beginning. And when we come for you, and we will come, you will wish you had never heard our name. The transmission ended. Earth's remaining defenses fell silent. The Velkaroth claimed victory and celebrated their conquest. But in the darkness of space, hidden among asteroids and dead moons, humanity was already preparing. They had lost their home, but they had not lost their spirit. They had been knocked down, but they would rise again. The Velkaroth had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that destroying Earth meant destroying humanity. They did not understand that humans were not just a civilization. They were survivors, adapters, fighters. 3 months passed after the fall of Earth. The Velkaroth Dominion declared total victory over humanity. High Commander Zorvath, the architect of the invasion, stood before his people and announced that the human contamination had been erased from the galaxy. There would be no more resistance. There would be no more defiance. The upstart species from the small blue planet had been crushed like insects beneath the boot of the Dominion. Zorvath was a massive creature, standing 8 feet tall, with gray-scaled skin and 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His eyes were black as the void between stars, and they held no warmth, no mercy. He had conquered 100 worlds in his long life. He had exterminated species that had existed for millions of years. Humanity, he believed, was just another mark on his record. Just another pest eliminated. He demanded tributes from the neighboring alien species as proof of Dominion supremacy. Ships arrived carrying gold and rare metals and living slaves. Zorvath watched them from his throne and felt satisfied. The universe was as it should be. The strong ruled, and the weak served or died. But then strange things began to happen. It started small. An outpost on the far edge of the galaxy stopped sending reports. Zorvath sent a patrol ship to investigate. The patrol ship never came back. He sent a larger force, 10 warships armed with the finest weapons the Dominion possessed. They found the outpost destroyed, its walls scorched by weapons fire, its crew dead at their stations. There were no survivors, and there were no clues about who had attacked. Zorvath was annoyed but not concerned. Pirates, perhaps. Or rebels from one of the conquered species. He ordered increased patrols and moved on with his business. Then supply lines began to vanish. Cargo ships carrying food and fuel to the front lines disappeared without a trace. Communication relays went silent in the middle of transmissions. A mining station that employed thousands of workers was found empty one morning, its equipment still running, its halls echoing with silence. It was as if the workers had simply walked into the void and never returned. A patrol fleet of 40 ships was sent to investigate a disturbance near a dead system. They never reported back. Search parties found only one survivor, a young Velkarath soldier, drifting in an escape pod. His mind was broken, and he could only whisper one thing over and over again. Ghosts in the void. Ghosts in the void. They came from nowhere. They were everywhere. Ghosts in the void. Zorvath executed the soldier for cowardice and ordered the incident classified. But rumors spread through the Dominion like wildfire. Soldiers began to fear the dark spaces between stars. Officers requested transfers away from the outer regions. Something was out there, and no one knew what it was. On occupied Earth, things were even worse. The Velkarath had established a garrison in the ruins of what had once been a great city. They built their headquarters on the ashes of human homes and raised their flag over the rubble. They brought in workers to rebuild the infrastructure and slaves to serve their officers. They believed the planet was secure. They were wrong. The attacks began without warning. A supply depot exploded in the middle of the night. A guard tower was found with its entire crew dead, their throats cut while they slept. A high-ranking officer was assassinated in his own quarters, a human knife driven through his heart. The Velkarath searched for the attackers, but found nothing. The humans seemed to appear from nowhere, strike with deadly precision, and vanish before anyone could respond. They emerged from tunnels the Velkarath never knew existed. They hid in sewers and basements and abandoned buildings. They watched and waited and struck when the enemy least expected it. A young Velkarath officer named Krath was assigned to investigate the resistance. He was smart and ambitious, and he believed he could succeed where others had failed. He studied the attack patterns. He interviewed survivors. He examined the bodies of the fallen. What he discovered terrified him. The humans were not fighting like a defeated people. They were fighting like hunters. They chose their targets carefully. They exploited every weakness. They used weapons made from stolen Velkarath technology, modified and improved in ways that should have been impossible. They communicated through codes that no Velkarath could crack, and they never ever stopped. Krath reported his findings to Zorvath, warning him that the resistance was far more organized and dangerous than anyone had realized. The High Commander dismissed his concerns with a wave of his clawed hand. "They are vermin, hiding in holes," Zorvath said. "They will be exterminated, like vermin. Increase the patrols. Burn any building where resistance is suspected. Kill 10 humans for every Velkarath that falls. They will learn their place." The crackdowns began. Velkarath soldiers swept through the ruins, burning and killing without mercy. But for every human they killed, 2 more seemed to take their place. For every tunnel they discovered, 3 more remained hidden. The resistance grew stronger with every passing day, fed by hatred and desperation, and a burning desire for revenge. In the shadows of the ruined city, a woman named Lucy Grant led one of the most effective resistance cells. She had been a school teacher before the invasion, gentle and kind, and loved by her students. Now she was a warrior, her hands stained with Velkarath blood, her heart hardened by loss. She had watched her husband die in the initial bombardment. She had seen her neighbors dragged away to slavery. She had buried friends in shallow graves dug in the middle of the night. She had nothing left but the fight. Lucy coordinated with other resistance leaders through a network of hidden messengers and coded signals. They shared intelligence about enemy movements. They planned attacks together. They kept the flame of hope alive in the hearts of their people. One night, she gathered her cell in an underground bunker and spoke to them about the future. "The Vel'Korath think they have won," she said. "They think we are broken. They think we are afraid. But they are wrong. We are not broken. We are angry. We are not afraid. We are patient. And patience is the weapon they will never understand." She told them about Operation Ember, the secret plan that had been set in motion before Earth fell. She told them about the human seeds that had been scattered across the galaxy, waiting for the signal to grow. She told them that they were not alone, that help was coming, that the darkness would not last forever. "We are the thorns in their side," Lucy said. "We are the poison in their blood. Every day we fight, every night we strike, we remind them that humanity is not dead. We remind them that they made a mistake. And one day, when the time is right, they will pay for that mistake with everything they have." Her words spread through the resistance like fire. Morale soared. Attacks intensified. The Vel'Korath garrison, once arrogant and confident, began to look over their shoulders. They began to fear the shadows. They began to understand, dimly, that something was very wrong. Zorvath received reports of the growing unrest and dismissed them as the desperate actions of a dying species. He had more important matters to attend to. His empire was vast, and Earth was just one small planet among millions. He did not realize that the ghost attacks on his outposts, the vanishing supply lines, the silent patrol fleets, they were all connected. He did not realize that humanity had planned for this, that they had prepared for defeat and turned it into something else entirely. The Vel'Korath had won the battle for Earth, but they were already losing the war they did not know had begun. And in the cold darkness of space, hidden in places no Vel'Korath would ever think to look, humanity was waking up. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the light of the sun, there was an asteroid that did not appear on any map. It looked like any other rock drifting through the cold void, gray, lifeless, unremarkable. But beneath its surface, buried under miles of ice and stone, was the beating heart of humanity's survival. Dr. Nate Sullivan had lived in this hidden base for 7 years. He was a thin man with wild hair and eyes that burned with intensity. Before the invasion, he had been one of Earth's leading scientists, working on projects so secret that even most government officials did not know they existed. Now he was the guardian of humanity's greatest weapon. It was not a bomb. It was not a fleet. It was something far more powerful. It was a network. Nate stood in the control room and watched dozens of screens flicker with data. Each screen showed a different location. A space station orbiting a distant star. A colony hidden in the rings of a gas giant. A freighter drifting through shipping lanes used by 100 different species. And on each of these screens, humans waited for orders. They were the seeds of Operation Ember. For decades, even before the Vel'Korath had shown themselves to be a threat, Earth's leaders had prepared for the worst. They had sent people into the galaxy with false identities and careful training. These people had become refugees on alien worlds, workers in alien factories, traders in alien markets. They had married, raised families, built lives, but they had never forgotten who they were, and they had never stopped preparing. Nate turned to his assistant, a young woman named Katie Vance. She was small but fierce, with short black hair and a scar running down her left cheek. She had earned that scar in the Battle of Earth, fighting alongside soldiers twice her age. She had been just 19 years old. "Is the network ready?" Nate asked. Katie nodded. Every cell has reported in. We have people on 217 worlds, including 34 inside Velkarath territory. They are waiting for your signal. Nate took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been preparing for his entire life. Everything depended on what happened next. If he succeeded, humanity would have a chance to fight back. If he failed, they would fade into history, another species erased by the Velkarath Dominion. He pressed the button. Across the galaxy, communicators buzzed and beeped. Hidden transmitters received the coded message. And in 1,000 different places, humans who had been pretending to be harmless suddenly remembered what they truly were. On a Velkarath shipyard, orbiting a red dwarf star, an engineer named Derek Cole received the signal during his lunch break. He was a quiet man who had worked at the shipyard for 6 years, repairing engines and welding hull plates. His supervisors thought he was reliable and hard-working. His co-workers thought he was friendly, but boring. None of them suspected that he had spent every free moment for the past 6 years mapping the station's weaknesses. Derek finished his lunch, walked to his workstation, and began the sequence he had memorized years ago. He disabled safety systems. He overloaded power cores. He locked doors and sealed corridors. Within an hour, the shipyard was tearing itself apart from the inside. 300 Velkarath warships were destroyed before they could even launch. Derek escaped in a maintenance pod, disappearing into the void before anyone understood what had happened. On a mining colony controlled by the Dominion, a woman named Sarah Park led a group of human workers in a sudden uprising. They seized weapons from the armory, freed prisoners from the detention center, and captured the colony's communication hub. Within days, they had turned the colony into a base for further operations. On a passenger liner traveling through neutral space, a retired soldier named Jack Webb revealed himself to be anything but retired. He took control of the ship, rescued a group of human refugees who had been traveling in secret, and redirected the vessel to a hidden rendezvous point. The awakening spread like wildfire. Humans who had been invisible suddenly became visible. Humans who had been harmless suddenly became deadly. The Velkarath found their supply lines cut, their outposts destroyed, their secrets exposed. And they had no idea how it was happening. High Commander Zorvath received reports of the chaos with growing fury. How was this possible? He had destroyed Earth. He had scattered humanity to the winds. How could they be organized? How could they be fighting back? He demanded answers, but his officers had none to give. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. They struck without warning and vanished without trace. They knew Velkarath codes and patrol routes and security protocols. It was as if they had been planning this for years, which of course, they had. Admiral Grace Monroe emerged from hiding to take command of the awakening fleet. She had survived the fall of Earth by escaping in a small shuttle moments before her flagship was destroyed. For 3 months, she had moved from base to base, coordinating the network, waiting for the right moment. Now that moment had come. She stood on the bridge of a captured Velkarath cruiser, renamed the Phoenix, and addressed her people through a secure transmission. For 3 months, we have hidden in the shadows, she said. We have watched our enemies celebrate their victory. We have let them believe we were defeated. But we were never defeated. We were preparing, and now we are ready. She looked into the camera with eyes that burned with cold fire. The Velkarath thought they were hunting us. They were wrong. We were the hunters all along. Every attack they suffered, every outpost that went silent, every ship that vanished, that was us. We have been inside their empire from the beginning. We know their weaknesses. And now, we are going to teach them what it means to make humanity their enemy. The message reached every human in the galaxy. It reached resistance fighters on Earth and sleeper agents on distant worlds, and refugees who had given up hope. And for the first time since the invasion began, they allowed themselves to believe that victory was possible. Katie Vance led the first major strike. Her target was a Vel'Karath dreadnought, the pride of Zorvath, a massive warship that had led the assault on Earth. It was guarded by a fleet of escorts and surrounded by layers of security. No one thought it could be captured. Katie proved them wrong. She and her team infiltrated the ship disguised as maintenance workers. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, disabling sensors and neutralizing guards. When they reached the bridge, they struck with sudden violence. Within minutes, the ship was theirs. Katie turned the pride of Zorvath's weapons against its own fleet. Escort ships exploded in balls of fire. The Vel'Karath scrambled to respond, but they were too slow, too confused. By the time reinforcements arrived, Katie and her team were gone, taking the captured dreadnought with them. The news of the capture spread across the galaxy. Other species, long oppressed by the Dominion, watched with wonder. They had believed the Vel'Karath were invincible. They had believed resistance was impossible. Now they began to think differently. If humans could fight back, maybe they could too. In his throne room, Zorvath received the news of the pride of Zorvath's capture with silent rage. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. He had underestimated humanity. He had thought they were weak and primitive and easily crushed. He had thought their final message was nothing but empty words. Now he understood that he had been wrong about everything. Humanity was not a species to be exterminated. They were a plague, and the infection had already spread far deeper than he had ever imagined. The war had truly begun. For 6 months, humanity had waged a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They did not fight for territory. They did not hold ground or build fortresses. They moved like smoke through the enemy's empire, striking and vanishing, bleeding the Dominion slowly but surely. Commander Ben Hartley stood on the bridge of the Relentless and studied the tactical display before him. The ship had been repaired and upgraded with captured Vel'Karath technology, and now it flew faster and hit harder than ever before. Around it, a fleet of human and allied vessels waited for orders. Yes, allies. That was the most surprising development of all. The Tal'Vori Collective had been slaves of the Dominion for over 1,000 years. They were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and large dark eyes, and they had been forced to build ships and weapons for their masters for generations. When they saw humanity fighting back against the Vel'Karath, something changed in them. They began to hope. They began to dream of freedom. Their rebellion started small, sabotaged equipment, delayed shipments, whispered resistance. But when human agents made contact and offered support, the rebellion exploded. Tal'Vori workers seized factories and shipyards. Tal'Vori soldiers turned their weapons against their oppressors. Within weeks, an entire sector had broken free from Dominion control. The Keth nomads joined next. They were a wandering species that traveled the galaxy in great caravan fleets, traders and merchants who had survived by staying neutral in every conflict. But the Vel'Karath had grown greedy, demanding more and more tribute, threatening to destroy any caravan that did not comply. The Keth had no love for the Dominion, and when humanity offered them a chance for revenge, they took it. Other species followed. Some contributed ships. Some simply stopped cooperating with the Dominion, refusing to supply food or fuel or materials. The empire that had seemed so invincible began to crack under the pressure. High Commander Zorvath responded with brutality. He ordered massacres on rebellious worlds. He sent his fleets to crush any sign of resistance. But for every fire he put out, 2 more ignited. His forces were stretched thin, racing from crisis to crisis, while humanity picked them apart, piece by piece. Hartley received word from Admiral Monroe that the time had come for the final push. The target was Velkarath Prime itself, the heart of the Dominion, the homeworld of the enemy. No one had ever attacked it successfully. No one had ever even tried. Until now. The human fleet gathered at a rendezvous point deep in neutral space. It was a strange collection of vessels, Earth ships that had survived the invasion, captured Velkarath cruisers, Talvori destroyers, Keth transport carriers converted into warships. They came from every corner of the galaxy, united by a common purpose. Hartley addressed the fleet before they jumped to enemy territory. "I will not lie to you," he said. "Many of us will not survive this battle. The Velkarath will fight harder than they have ever fought before, because they will be defending their home. But remember why we are here. Remember the colonies they burned. Remember the people they killed. Remember Earth." He paused, and his voice grew hard. "They started this war. We are going to finish it." The fleet jumped. They emerged from faster-than-light travel on the edge of the Velkarath home system. Before them lay Velkarath Prime, a dark world orbiting a dying red sun. It was surrounded by rings of defense stations and orbital platforms, protected by the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. The battle began immediately. Velkarath's ships rushed to meet the attackers, their weapons filling the void with deadly fire. Human vessels answered with everything they had. Ships exploded on both sides, crews dying in the cold darkness of space. The noise of combat was deafening, alarms screaming, weapons roaring, commanders shouting orders. Hartley led the Relentless into the heart of the enemy formation. He had learned many things during the long months of war, and one of them was that humans could do things other species considered impossible. He ordered his ship to dive straight toward a Velkarath carrier, so close that the enemy's weapons could not track them. At the last moment, he fired every missile he had into the carrier's engine section, and pulled away as the massive vessel tore itself apart. Other human captains used similar tactics. They rammed their damaged ships into enemy vessels, sacrificing themselves to take out larger targets. They used asteroids as weapons, steering them into defensive stations. They detonated the nuclear reactors of captured ships inside enemy formations. The Velkarath had never faced an enemy willing to die so readily. They did not understand that humanity had nothing left to lose. While the space battle raged, Captain Megan Tate led a ground assault on Velkarath Prime itself. Her dropship punched through the atmosphere, surrounded by burning debris and heavy fire. Half of her squadron was destroyed before they reached the surface. But Megan and her soldiers hit the ground running. The capital city was a fortress of dark stone and twisted metal, built to withstand any attack. Velkarath soldiers defended every street, every building, every room. They were larger and stronger than humans, with claws that could tear through armor and skin thick enough to stop bullets. But they had never fought humans on the ground before. Megan's soldiers moved through the city like water, using every piece of cover, every shadow, every broken wall. They set traps and ambushes. They fought with knives and fists when their ammunition ran out. They refused to retreat, refused to surrender, refused to die quietly. The fighting lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The city burned around them. The streets ran with blood from both sides. But slowly, step by step, the humans pushed forward. Megan herself led the assault on the Dominion's Central Command building. Her armor was cracked, and her face was covered in blood and dirt. But her eyes were clear and focused. She kicked down the door to the throne room and found High Commander Zorvath waiting for her. He was alone. His guards had fled or died. His fleet was being destroyed in orbit above. His empire was crumbling around him. And yet he stood tall, his forearms spread wide, his black eyes filled with hatred. "You think you have won," he hissed. "You have won nothing. Even if you kill me, the Dominion will survive. Others will rise to take my place. We will hunt your species to extinction. We will—" Megan shot him in the knee. Zorvath howled and collapsed, his threats dissolving into screams of pain. Megan walked over to him and pressed her weapon against his head. "You talk too much," she said. But she did not pull the trigger. Her orders were clear. Zorvath was to be taken alive if possible. He would face justice for his crimes, not a quick death in a burning throne room. She called for her soldiers to secure the prisoner. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the burning city below. Above her, through the smoke and flames, she could see the flashes of the space battle still raging. Somewhere up there, the Relentless was fighting. Somewhere up there, Commander Hartley was giving everything he had. And somewhere, across the galaxy, Admiral Monroe was watching and waiting and hoping that all their sacrifices would be enough. The battle for Velkarath Prime ended on a gray morning, when the last Dominion warship surrendered. The enemy fleet was destroyed. The orbital defenses were silent. The capital city lay in ruins, its dark towers broken and burning. And in the throne room of the Central Command building, the creature who had ordered the destruction of Earth knelt in chains. High Commander Zorvath had been a proud being once. He had commanded the mightiest empire the galaxy had ever known. He had believed himself invincible, untouchable, destined to rule forever. Now he was a prisoner, his gray scales covered in dust and dried blood, his forearms bound behind his back. They brought him to the bridge of the Relentless. Commander Ben Hartley watched as the guards escorted the fallen tyrant through the doors. The bridge was crowded with officers and crew members who had fought through the long war. They stared at Zorvath with hatred in their eyes, remembering the colonies he had burned, the friends he had killed, the homes he had destroyed. But Hartley had ordered them to stay silent. This moment was not about revenge. It was about something more important. Admiral Grace Monroe stepped forward to face the High Commander. She looked older than she had before the war, her silver hair thinner, her face lined with exhaustion and grief. She had lost so much: her ship, her crew, countless soldiers who had served under her command. But she was still standing. Humanity was still standing. And that was what mattered. Zorvath raised his head and looked at her with those empty black eyes. "You have won nothing," he said. His voice was weak, but it still carried echoes of his old arrogance. "Kill me if you wish. It changes nothing. The Dominion will survive. Others will rise to continue my work. Your species is still weak, still primitive. In 100 years, you will be forgotten." Monroe shook her head slowly. "You still do not understand," she said. "After everything that has happened, you still do not see." She stepped closer, close enough to look directly into his eyes. "You asked us once, through your messengers and your threats, why we would not simply surrender. You told us that resistance was pointless. You told us that you were inevitable, that your victory was certain, that fighting back would only bring us more pain." She paused. "Do you remember what we answered?" Zorvath said nothing. "We answered with a message that said you had signed your doom. And you laughed. You called it the desperate words of a dying species. You dismissed it as meaningless." Monroe turned and gestured to the observation window. Beyond the glass, the ruins of Velkarath Prime stretched to the horizon, smoke rising from 1,000 fires. "Look at your world, Zorvath. Look at what we have done. We are not a mighty empire. We do not have 10,000 years of history. We are young and small, and by your standards, primitive. And yet here we stand, in the heart of your territory, with your empire in ashes around us." She turned back to face him. "You want to know how we did it? How we beat you? I will tell you, because I want you to understand. I want you to carry this knowledge with you for the rest of your miserable life." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but her words cut like knives. We won because you only ever saw what we built. You saw our ships and our weapons and our colonies. You measured our strength in numbers and technology. And by those measures, you were right. We were weaker than you. She leaned closer. But you never understood what we are. You never understood the thing that makes humanity different from every other species in this galaxy. Zorvath stared at her, waiting. We are the species that crawled out of caves when the world was covered in ice, Monroe said. We tamed fire when we were still fighting with stones. We split the atom and walked on our moon within a single century. We have survived ice ages and asteroids and plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. Every single thing that should have killed us, every disaster and extinction event, only made us stronger. She straightened and clasped her hands behind her back. You made one mistake, Zorvath. One terrible, fatal mistake. You gave us a reason to stop being peaceful. You took our home and killed our people and thought we would simply disappear. But we do not disappear. We do not forget. She looked at him with something almost like pity. And we never, ever forgive twice. Zorvath's face twisted with rage and despair. For the first time in his long life, he truly understood what humanity was. They were not just another species. They were survivors, fighters, a people forged by millions of years of struggle and hardship, tempered by disasters that would have destroyed any other race. And he had made them his enemy. The Vel'Karath Dominion collapsed in the months that followed. Without Zorvath's iron will holding it together, the empire fractured into 100 warring factions. The species that had been enslaved for centuries rose up and claimed their freedom. The territory that had once been ruled by terror became a patchwork of independent worlds, each finding its own way forward. Earth was reclaimed and rebuilt. Families that had been scattered across the galaxy were reunited. Children who had been born in hiding grew up under open skies, learning the history of how their people had fallen and risen again. Admiral Monroe retired to a small house overlooking the ocean, where she spent her remaining years watching the waves and remembering the friends she had lost. Commander Hartley continued to serve in the fleet, training the next generation of officers, making sure they never forgot the lessons of the war. Captain Megan Tate became a leader in the new government, working to build a society worthy of the sacrifices that had been made. And across the galaxy, the legend of humanity spread from world to world, species to species. They told stories of the small blue planet that had been burned to ashes, and the stubborn people who had refused to die. They told stories of the message that had been sent as Earth fell, the promise of doom that had been dismissed as empty words. They told stories of how that promise had been kept. A monument was built on Earth, in the center of what had once been a great city. It was a simple black obelisk, tall and solemn, reaching toward the sky. Engraved on its surface were the names of every human who had died in the war, soldiers and civilians, adults and children, the known and the unknown. At the base of the monument, a plaque was placed. It held a single inscription, words that had been spoken by a resistance fighter in the dark days of the occupation. They came to bury us. They did not know we were seeds. Children visited the monument on school trips, running their fingers over the names, trying to imagine what it had been like. Veterans came and stood in silence, remembering battles and fallen friends. Families brought flowers and photographs, honoring ancestors they had never met. And somewhere in the stars, alien diplomats gathered in their councils and reminded their governments of one unbreakable rule: never provoke humanity, never threaten their home, never assume that silence means surrender, because humans remember everything. They learn from every defeat. They grow stronger from every hardship. And when they send a final message, they always keep their promise. The war was over. Earth had survived. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. And the universe would never forget what they had done.